Hi everyone, my name is Sam Beiko. I'm the Artistic Director of the Prairie Mountains Festival, but in addition to doing that, I am also a substantive editor and I've worked in the publishing industry since 2010, and I also write books. And at one point I worked at a bookstore, so I've basically done everything that has to do with making books. So this is pitching to publishers. Basically, the shape of this panel is usually folks come in and they just want to ask questions on how to pitch to a publisher. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. And feel free to interject throughout with your questions. Don't have to wait for us to bring up a topic. You can just interrupt us. The very fancy person to my right is Matt Jodry.
Known as Fancy.
Fancy Matt.
Fancy Matt.
Or Matt Bay. Matt is the head publisher of At Bay Press, a local Manitoba-based publisher of poetry, fiction, graphic novels, and all kinds of stuff.
That's right. Yep. We started the press in Toronto when we moved here about 16 years ago now. And we publish about 15 to 20 new titles a year. Those are not just graphic novels, fiction in all its various genres, nonfiction, poetry, and then what I call just some weird books. Stuff that we're just like, oh my God, this is just so crazy awesome that we just can't say no. And yeah, we try to find a home for it in the trade.
And full disclosure, I also edit books for At Bay sometimes as a freelancer.
Yeah.
Which is great. It's been great. I've been working this summer. I've got a lot of good projects. So pitching to publishers. Who here is a creator of any kind? Perfect. Well, you're in the right place.
You're in the right room.
Yeah. And a lot of folks are hesitant to call themselves writers or creators because the thing that they have made is not finished. But as long as you've thought about it, you were creating it. Therefore, you were a creator. You did. Step one. Publishing is hard. Okay, getting stuff published is tough, and there are a lot of options out there now. A lot of folks have more control over publishing their own stuff. But usually at the beginning, when you're just starting out, you come to a publisher for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah. By the way, Francois on his way.
Great, you did it.
So for me, one of the things that we did about 2 years ago is we eliminated all paper submissions. We used to do the old school way. Package it up in a Jiffy Pad, send it out to us, and then our editors would review it, by hand. And we found that the rising costs of shipping, paper, all that was really killing the opportunity for authors and artists to submit to us because of cost. So like to send a single book to one publisher, like a printed manuscript, was running about $100, $150 all in with time, effort, gas, fuel, materials, toner. You know what I mean? Like it was just, so we were like, okay, we're gonna create this system. We created a system called Can Submit that you can sign up on our website and submit, and Can Submit allows you to create a profile and then just upload all your documents to us. And we have a submissions guideline on our website that tells you how to submit to us, what materials we're looking for. But once you submit, then you get a response back from Can Submit that tells you success, you managed to submit your documents, and away you go. We have no control over, like the Can Submit system doesn't know, you could submit nothing to us. You could submit blank pages. And it will just be like, all right, something got submitted. It's not AI, is what I'm saying. It's not going to be able to read this and go, oh, they did everything that they're supposed to do. So there's still this aspect of professionalism that we're looking for, where you are going to follow our submission guidelines. You're going to submit a cover letter, an artist author CV, and a synopsis of the book, and then the manuscript itself. So those are like the four main elements that we're looking for. Now, some people are like, well, I don't have any publishing credits, so I'm just not going to submit a CV. And wrong. Submit a CV. Just tell us that you don't have any publishing credits. That's your CV. Like, just tell us a little bit about yourself, right? I went to creative writing at, you know, U of California or something like that, or, you know, like, give us some information about why you think you're credible to write this book. If you don't have any publishing credits, that's fine, because lots of people don't. If you do, all the better, put them in there. But the cover letter that is, you know, that you're going to submit is going to be a little different. The cover letter is going to talk about why you think this book is a fit for At Bay Press, because you've looked over our catalog. You know that we publish, you know, these certain types of books. But I have lots of people who submit to us that submit like a children's book, which we don't publish. And I feel so terrible because 6 months later, they're getting a response from us via the CAN submit system, you know, which is just a form letter that just says, sorry, we're rejecting your work because if you just would have read our submission guidelines, you would have known that, like, we don't accept children's books, right? But people don't do the work. And to me, it's the same as just applying for a job. I mean, it's the same idea. You wouldn't show up at the place that you're trying to, like, get hired at without your CV and, you know, putting your best foot forward. That's just how we operate. I mean, I'm sure other publishers are different. They have different criteria. Maybe these two could talk a little bit that would be.
Yeah, so first up, I'm sorry I'm late, everyone. Just check. I was checking on with somebody and I missed out. So sorry about that. I'm François Vigneault. I am the marketing manager at Pal Press, which is a press out of Montreal. We publish books in English and in French both. So I'd be happy to talk about like the kind of submissions that we take there. But I'm also really happy to talk to you more generally about the idea of pitching and stuff like that, because I'm also a creator and I've pitched a lot of different publishers all around Canada, all around the United States. And so I think I have a little bit of a sense. I've also worked at other kind of mainstream publishers, kids publishers, so I know a little bit about like the slush pile and how that works, and I can give you a little bit of feedback. But we'll see how that goes. But that's me.
Yeah. So what is your submission process like? So Matt was just talking about how they turned it all digital, about like kind of the standard, which is query letter, CV, synopsis, and whole project. Do you have kind of more of a loose process where it's like, here's the idea, here are some samples?
We're pretty, I think from what I was hearing, I think we're a little bit more loose in some ways, but in other ways it's very similar. We want to really understand the project, right? And so that I think is the biggest thing, that if you're pitching to a publisher, you want to be able to get what the project is. And so one of the big things is that, for us, we're not super interested in like a manuscript that is like not illustrated comics pages, because we don't do matchmaking. We're not like connecting. We don't have a stable of artists and we're like, oh, this person would be great for this. Other publishers do that, but that's not what we do. So really we want to be able to understand like what the comic is. And that doesn't have to be the whole comic, like it doesn't even have to be the whole story, like even in the manuscript. As long as there's like, 5-10 pages of comic art that we can understand, like we can read, we can see like, oh, okay, this person understands the kind of story that they're telling. We can theoretically see like what the final art would look like. That really makes all the difference in the world, because you just really have to understand what the book is. A lot of times if you read like a cover letter or like a pitch document and it doesn't have any sample pages in it, it's very hard to imagine like what that book is going to be like. We would take a physical paper pitch, I guess, if someone really wanted to send it in to us, but I would say 99.9% of the time it would be much better just send us an email. We basically have all of our things go to our generalized email, info@Pal Press or editionpapal.com, French and English both, and we send people back to basically a really simple form letter. We're like, hey, we've received your thing, thank you very much. And if you haven't heard from us in 1 month, that means that we're not interested, because we try to move fast. We're lucky we don't get thousands and thousands of things. I used to intern at a children's publishing company, and they would get 1,000 a month, because everyone, and all up and coming children's writers here, write your children's book. It's gonna be great. But I will tell you that everyone thinks that they can write like an ABC book. There's a lot of them.
Yeah, for sure.
And that was my job when I was interning there. Just like go through this slush pile, and like you really rarely find anything in there.
Yeah.
But we try and keep it really simple. But the biggest thing I would say from Pal's point of view is that we really just need to be able to get what the heck is going on with the comic. If it's a mystery, or if it's like, oh, here's an idea, but like not like how you write dialogue, how you are going to present that idea on the page, that it would have to be like, wow, it's out of sight for us to dig that much deeper into it. Does that make sense?
If that person coming to you and they're like, I have this idea, but you know that they have a pedigree, you've seen past examples of their work, maybe already.
Sure, yeah.
And you're like, well, I do know how that person's going to execute that.
Yeah.
But sight unseen on a new creator is kind of tough.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're always your door's always open, sort of thing.
Oh, sure. I mean, I know that Luke, who's the person who makes the file decisions on that, he's the founder and the editor. He met someone at a TCAF portfolio review, and they had the example of their book, and that was what they were doing the portfolio review about. And he liked it a lot. And he signed them on the spot at the festival. Yeah. So he follows his gut. If he likes what he sees, he's gonna move forward with it. But I've never seen him move forward on something where he didn't get what the comic was.
Yeah, for sure. I'd be the exact same. Like for me, I wanted I remember getting a submission years ago where the person in their synopsis, they left a cliffhanger at the end. They were like, and then something crazy. And I'm like, I'm not the reader, I'm the publisher. We're the editor. You have to tell us what happened. You're not selling us on the book that way. You're selling us on the book by telling us every intimate detail so that we know exactly what Francois was saying. It's just we want to know. We're the guy you do need to reveal all the secrets to, and make sure that we understand those intimately, so that we can we're gonna begin to think about okay, can we market this book? Does it have a place in the trade? Is it going to be niche, or is it going to be national, or is it going to be international? Do we have the opportunity to sell rights for it, or that sort of thing, right? And I just think that that is that's just a great way of approaching it. It's just thinking from that perspective.
Yes, it's just making sure if I was a moderator, if I was a publisher. Actually, but that actually did make me think also from an author's perspective. So I am a published author of young adult fiction, and I've been doing that. My first book was published in 2013, so 11 years now. So from my perspective also, there are other avenues as well that aren't just publishers who you're pitching to as well. There are also literary agents. That's a whole other layer. And pitching to them is sort of similar to pitching to publishers. It's sort of the same bent. They all have their own submission guidelines. For them, they all have different windows of opportunity where you can pitch things to them. And the way a literary agent works, for folks who don't know, they take in submissions, they look over your stuff, and then they see if they know someone in their publishing cache who they can fit with. So they act as your representative, your liaison, and they can get you in with publishers who don't have these open door policies that are big multinationals like Penguin Random House or,
I just was going to say that it feels like there's a big divide between the Canadian market and the American market, and maybe even more between the Quebec market and the American market, where almost everybody I know in Quebec is agentless, and the agent that they self-represent themselves, and then everybody I know in the United States is fighting. They either have an agent or they're fighting and dying to try and get an agent. It's a very, very different world there.
Yeah, and I am an agent too, so I have gone through my entire career without one. And maybe I'm a little bit of a unique case because I have a postgraduate in book publishing, so I'm aware of the way that the system works, but majority of all the information that I have been apprised to as an author is available online or is available at events like this, conferences where you can go and get the information. I don't feel like we're gatekeeping the information. We want you to have it. And also,
Oh, I for sure want people to have.
yeah, like you want people to be able to facilitate having these relationships.
Yeah, because I want to see the very best of what you've got. I don't want to see the worst.
How do both of you feel when you're behind a table at an event like this and someone's just like, oh, and they just drop their whole binder and they're like, oh, I'm finishing my book. How do you feel about that?
Well, it's a lightweight, teachable moment, right? And I don't think I'm going out on a limb here to say that, like, some of us are in this world of comics and stuff. Like, maybe like some of our social skills were not like precision developed in like junior high, and like it took us a little bit longer. And we're all on like this this path of like learning how to deal with people. Like, don't just drop a bunch of stuff off in front of somebody at like the table when they're doing their business, because like it's not what they want. There's never once has like that been like the moment where they were like, oh, this is perfect, I'm gonna sign you up, and like this is I don't think that's ever happened. People do want to structure it. Like when someone does that to me, I try and be like gentle and like guide them, because I want them to kind of get that like what they're doing is not the exact way to do it, and then they can learn some other stuff. But I always tell them, I'm not going to take anything physically from you right now, and I'm also not going to review this with you right now, but you can email me.
Yeah.
And then I'll usually tell them to email them too, but I'll usually tell them, if you don't hear back from us in a month, that means we don't want the book, and it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to, I've been rejected. If they want to get into it with me, I'll be like, a million places have rejected me. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah. And I'm here, and that's why I run a publisher, because I'll never be rejected as the boss. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, it's not the time. Also, the history of this festival as well. We have done this panel, I think, every single year, and without fail, there is someone who comes to the panel and they try to pitch it in the middle of the panel. So don't do that. But yeah, these are again opportunities to ask the folks who are, and who could enable that connection, any of those questions and how to do it. You've had similar experiences, I think, with that.
I've actually had somebody who, so first off, I should qualify this because I have picked up a book where somebody showed up at our table and they had an ash can and they showed it to me, and I was like blown away. But I also knew this person's work.
Can you explain what an ash can is?
Yeah, it's a little mini comic, like usually like a sampler of like maybe like 10 pages.
On like maybe Xerox paper.
Yeah, yeah. And so it was like, but they were like basically like, I finished the book, but I didn't want to bring the whole thing. Here's just a sample. And I had known their work in the past, so I liked their work before, and now they were showing me something that was complete. And so I did take them, not on the right there. That's extremely rare. To be honest with you, I have to go back to our can submit system, because one of the things that when we got unsolicited manuscripts in the mail was, because of the cost involved for the author, we were getting a lot more really good stuff as opposed to what we get through can submit, which is a lot of really, really bad stuff. We get about.
Do you mean bad, or do you mean just like unrefined?
No, I mean bad. Like we get stuff that we get stuff that's subjective.
Let me show you a list of the ones that I consider bad.
Subjectively bad, and then there's stuff that, like you said, shows real merit and promise, but it's not professionally ready. We will respond to those people and say, "You're close. Like, don't give up here. This is just our opinion. This is where we think your weaknesses are that you need to work on." Like of the 75 pages that you submitted, 25 of them really suck. But 50 of them are awesome. And you need to go back and work on those weak 25. Because it's not, but you've got a book here. You just got to do a little bit of extra legwork. The stuff that's really bad, you just send a form letter to. Or it's not for us. Like, it could be good, but it's not for us. It's just way outside of the realm of what our editorial vision is. And we're not doing it. But I will say that, like, because we've eliminated that cost barrier, now people are submitting like we get some generative AI submissions that we're seeing. And of course, we've revised our contracts in the last year to just basically, we've got a whole bunch of AI clauses in there now that just basically state that like you agree to and warrant that the work is 100% wholly generated by you as a human being as opposed to, machine learning generative AI. Because that's a real problem for us, especially in our work. I actually see like a shit ton of it in the comics world right now, with the mainstream comics world, especially with like floppies and all of the incentive covers. Like there's so much generative AI work that I'm seeing, and I can't believe that all these publishing houses, like big publishing houses, are releasing that into the world. But again, I digress. It's their decision, their qualifications, what they want to do. We just won't do it. And we're looking for stuff that really has a clear artistic and narrative vision, and that's exceptional.
You had said that you prefer seeing the art at the top. Recently, for something that I'm working on right now, I had done that. I put the character designs at the top, and the editor that I had submitted it to, they came back and they said, generally, publishers don't want this at the beginning.
Depends. I mean, everyone is different, Like there are many. I mean, when I used to work at a kids publishing house, we were not very interested in because they had a whole stable of artists that they were working with. They're not really interested in seeing what like a writer or like their friend was drawing. Like that's not. They would usually wanted to control various elements of it. Whereas we, as a publisher, we're interested in publishing like individuals' voices, and 99% of the time we publish some pairs, but like 99% of the time we're publishing a single person who's doing the writing and the illustration. And so we are not really interested in like an idea for a story without and actually, to tell the truth, character designs are not super interesting for us because of the market that we're in. We're not actually in a market where like, oh, the cool character design is going to sell it. There are lots of markets for that, like superhero comics and science fiction comics and stuff like that. And it is important to include a character design. But for us and the kind of publishing that we do, we're interested in what is the audience going to read on the page and the graphic novelness, if you want to call it that. And so it is important to include that art and even it doesn't even have to be like this is the perfect finished art, but it has to show your storytelling, because the storytelling for us is very important. And I would say that in general, also as a creator and as an artist and as someone who's read a bunch of different people's pitches and stuff like that, I actually think it's incredibly important to show like what is the final product, something like the final product gonna look like.
Yeah.
I'm the exact same. I need, like, we have been, we've been in business long enough now that years ago we would have accepted a story without the art, knowing that they were gonna, like they being either the author and the artist, or the author is also the artist, going to finish the work. That's not the case anymore, because with artwork, it takes forever. It requires so much time, effort, and demand of you that I'm right there with Francois. We need to see the finished work.
It's also a little bit of an extension, it's different than publishers, but I've also done a lot of stuff at like the Canada Council of Arts and been on the juries for literature and visual arts for graphic novels and things like that. And to tell the truth, the jury is very hard for them to, like, if you approach a jury, maybe some of them, they're in the literature department, they know what comics are, some don't exactly, and you're like, this is my idea for a story, but you don't have like, what is the final product gonna be? That can be quite tough. Tough for them to envision, and also tough for them to give you granting, even to work on the project. And I've had grants my personal self, when I wasn't, obviously I didn't jury myself, but when I submitted grants, and you submit like a couple pages of art, but it wasn't enough. Like the jury was like, there's not enough, we don't know what's going on here. Yeah. And so then you take that back, the next time you submit it, you submit more art, you submit a longer chunk of story, and I understand it's because they want to know, we're signing a grant for X amount of money, or we're signing on for an advance of this money, what is the thing that we're going to get at the end? And it doesn't have to be like perfect, but you have to be able to envision it. And some people can't envision it if it's just like some character designs and a story, that like a beat sheet or something like that. That can be hard for people to understand.
So a long million years ago, I was the editor on these original comics anthologies, and the reason I bring them up is kind of what we're talking about is you think that maybe your only chance at getting published or having a publishing credit is by publishing a full 150, 200-page graphic novel. And it's a one single story, or maybe it's one part of a series, and you're maybe working towards that. But that's like the first thing you've ever done. It's the first project you've ever scripted, or you've done your thumbs on, or you've done layout for. The great thing about anthology projects, and a lot of the times they are put together by an editor who has an idea for, putting together brand new comics under one theme. So I did these anthologies called Gothic Tales. The first one was Gothic Tales of Haunted Love. The second one was Gothic Tales of Haunted Future. They were Gothic romance comics, and we just basically put out a call for pitches. And what's great about an anthology project is that's where you're coming with an idea on a theme. And some of it, for the most part, when I, as the editor, would be reviewing, yes, I would need some art and I would need some character art, but those projects wouldn't have been created. Because for the most part, anthologies that are put out there, they're put out there under a crowdfunding campaign. So pretty much nothing is going to be made unless there is a budget to create it. So you are kind of coming with not a ton of material. We would maybe expect some character designs, a sample chapter, not a script, but at least a description of your story. And most of the time, it would be a single person who would be coming with, they would be doing the art and writing, or they would come and they would say, I'm a writer, but we would offer the opportunity to pair them with an artist because in my case, we do folks. But what's really great about those opportunities is then you learn what it feels like to make a comic, a short one, a 10-pager. You get into the anthology, you get paid a page rate, and maybe you're just a writer and you get paired with an artist maybe you never would have known or worked with. You learn how that collaborative process works because in comics, there can be this misconception that there's just a writer and that's your role, and you tell the artist what to do, and you make really detailed, and then there's a long panel, and it's scanning this way to the left across the cityscape, and then there's the next section, the next third is split into 3, and there are different faces. You as the writer, you have an idea, a concept, and the dialogue to carry it through, and the artist, who is probably also very experienced, will probably come back and say, actually, maybe we could consider conveying it this way. And then it becomes a collaboration, and that will influence your script. And then you have worked on this 10-pager, it's a story start to finish, learn about pacing, learn about everything. And then you can say, am I ready now to do a 2-page thing? And also you can come out of it with a publishing credit. And then when it comes time for you to put together a pitch for a publisher, the publisher will see that you have this credit working on anthologies, maybe several anthologies. They know that you're a good collaborator. They know that you have an understanding of how to structure your story and have that experience. And then you understand that in the pitch process, you understand what Francois and Matt talked about. You have to create something that people engage with, the editor engages with kind of right off the bat, for them to pick it up without seeing a lot. And I can kind of hear in my head, like, an alarm bell, that sounds like unpaid labor. That maybe you're going to have to front the cost to hire an artist to work with you to create a pitch package, and you have to kind of maybe raise some of that capital yourself. And yes, it costs. Doing this kind of stuff, just getting started, it's a business expense. It's an expense of kind of getting yourself started and getting your foot in the door. I've had a bunch of clients maybe over the past who have been like, well, I have the idea and I have the script and we'll make the money later. And when we make the money, that's when we'll pay the artist. So, well, no, in a lot of these cases, the publisher's not going to pay for the artist for you. You have to kind of maybe find someone else who is hungry and who is looking for getting their start, but partner up and make it a team effort and a partnership of equals, and have that capital for them, because the art is very intensive. I don't want to get into the art is the hardest part, then the writing, because they're both hard in their own way, but the art is much more labor intensive and also comes with a ton of training too. I also make a comic myself, so I forced myself to do that to be a better comics editor. It's so great spending years making a comic and you sell it to someone at a show and they come back an hour later and say, I read it all.
Yeah.
So yeah, anyway, it's just, it is going to be a lot of work and it's going to be a lot of trial and error. There are ways, the whole point of my rant is there are ways to kind of get started in a small way than just kind of being like, I've never done a comic before. Here's a 300-pager that I want to try and pitch around. Because as a creator, I've been rejected tons over the past couple of years.
Thick skin.
Thick skin, you just gotta.
If collaboration is the thing that interests you the most, if people want to hear your voice, it can be a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, it can be. And I think one of the things that is really worth understanding about the publisher side of things, which, and again, I'm just speaking about us. I'm not speaking for any other publishers. I'm looking for something that's staying power. And when I say staying power, what it means is I want something that is not going to come out, get published, and then just disappear. I'm looking for it to last. I'm looking for it. I want it to become something of great value. I know it sounds romantic and maybe even a little bit. That's what everybody wants. Right, of course, that's what everybody wants. But where I'm going with this is that part of that is my complete disdain for the current comic book industry and its valueless material at the top end. There's some great stuff being done by some great publishers, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying like 90% that in my opinion is absolute trash. Whereas there's this 10% of exceptional work where somebody still understands lighting, panel structure, perspective, right? Pace, plot. Thank you. Design, right? Where there's like this, because I think some people just sit down and go, oh, this is just comics. Like, as long as I put some illustrations on the page and put voice balloons down, I've got something. No. If you want something to even get a sniff of award attention or a review in a magazine or a periodical or newspaper, or even just hit home with readers, where like readers will be like, I read that book, it was awesome, and I'm willing to tell somebody else about it. Like, you should read that book. That's the best. That's better than a review in the newspaper, because that book has now become something that is of value to readers. Whereas stuff that's not that great, which there's a lot of not that great stuff that gets published, really just kind of just fades and disappears.
I'm just going to do a little tiny pushback, but I think I'm on board with you with everything. But I do think that there's another thing to keep in mind, which is that like when you're starting out, you don't have to be perfect, and you don't even have to be striving towards perfection in many ways. And actually, to tell the truth, I meet a lot of writers who want to be doing comics, but they think that they need to hire an artist to do like this perfect comic that's going to look like this really great product and things like that. And honestly, to tell the truth, a lot of writers just go ahead and draw your own comic, even if you can't draw. It's fine. It's like really okay to be drawing your own comic, and I'd encourage you to like walk around and like check out all the amazing different things that people are self-publishing, things like that at the show or putting on online. I'm into like old school, like the comic looks perfect and all that, like everything about it is perfect. And I'm into like perfectionist creators and artists. But to tell the truth, there's a huge amount of, like, it is okay to put your voice out there, even if your voice is raw, even if there's all kinds of things. In all honesty, your writing is probably raw. Your writing is probably not as perfect as you might imagine that it is. You can improve all of those things over time. Now, like, does that mean that you're going to be making money with your thing next year? Does that mean that like your comic's going to be pitched and like everyone's going to love it? No, but it doesn't mean that you can like start kind of like getting your voice out there, connecting with the community, enjoying yourself as a creator. All those things are very possible. And then in the long term, you never know what might happen. You know, like me, I was definitely coming from like a kind of a very DIY punk aesthetic that I was starting with, and I just did bad comics like that. Like I just did whatever I could, and I was trying to get stories out there. And like as you were mentioning, like getting stories in anthologies, but also self-publishing. I always start with something small. Like the 300-page comic is a bad place to start. Like start with the 1-page comic, then do 2 pages, then do 4, and like go from there. But don't let. I actually feel bad. I feel like there's a lot of, especially people on the writer side, who are afraid that like, oh, I have to spend, because like as an artist, you want a lot of money. Like I would like if someone randomly approached me and was like, I like the way you draw. Here's my story. I'd be like, okay, well, give me X amount of money per page, and it's going to be a lot more than a random person should actually probably spend on like kind of a startup, right? Like the startup, which is their story. But you can kind of DIY it, and like there's a lot of people who draw real raw, and they've been doing it for years, and then like they refine their art, they kind of pull it into things, and you can get something really interesting out of that. Like Alan Moore, way back in the day, he drew his own comics, like before he was writing for other people, he was like, and here's what I drew, and it doesn't look that good, but it's okay. Chip Zdarsky, like he's an illustrator, but his illustrations are not like that commercial, but he writes Batman, and he has some other person, he got his way, and he worked his way up, and that's in the total mainstream world too, so there's just a lot of different places. So the only thing is, I totally appreciate everything you're saying, but I just do want to say, like, I think it's important that we not put too much pressure on people to be like, wow, it's perfect. Because I also wanted things perfect, and I actually think I held off too long in diving into doing comics, and I wish I had gotten started a little bit earlier.
There's a difference between publishers. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I think that's Francois put out a great point, which is every publisher is different. And they have different thresholds and different interests.
And biases.
And biases, for sure.
Like a big thing about submission process is like taking it personally, and you should, because literally getting published can also just come down to luck and timing. 100%. And has like nothing to do with your work as well.
We talk about it in the office all the time. We're like, we realize that somebody has poured their heart and soul into this project, and they're going to get this little letter back that tells them that they're rejected. And we know that that is going to sting, probably even really hurt, and that kills us. Like we've never been in the business where we're like, oh yeah, we enjoy this. The worst thing my worst day is sending rejection letters. That's the worst part of my day. I absolutely hate it. I've never liked it. And one of the things that I've always wanted to try to do is offer some level of feedback that is constructive and positive.
Question?
I'm just wondering, it might be outside of the scope of this conversation, but like, what's the editorial process like? Like, if you do get your submission accepted, like, how much would it be changing with what you've already made, or what does that look like?
It's a great question. Every publisher is different. We accept work that we feel really we're only going to be doing like sort of like the tightening of the screws. We're not going to do massive rewrites. Otherwise, we would reject it. But that's just us. Other publishers might be like what Francois said. I see the rawness here, and I see real, genuine like merit, spirit, talent, passion, whatever. And we might be willing to take that leap a little bit further with you. We don't. We want to see it be more on that professional level, where, like I said, we would be the tightening of the screws. And I would kind of bump that over to Sam to talk about, because she is, an experienced substantive editor.
Did you want to talk briefly about?
No, that's fine.
All right, here I go. So yeah, again, it's all very subjective based on the project. A lot of things that come across my desk that are, so I'll be an editor contracted by a publisher. So I just kind of come in as a freelancer and I look at a book and it's been accepted. And there are times when, yeah, the book is really tight. I can really tell that this is like the 10th maybe draft or something, and it has been refined quite a lot. And then there are other times where it comes to me and there are kind of major things that need rethinking or retooling. There are times when maybe another consultant has to be hired, maybe for a sensitivity read.
That's a good point.
or there's like, major structural things where it's like, oh, I read this whole thing through and the pacing really seemed to drop off here, and, you consider adding, this many pages, to kind of bulk this up, or cutting. Cutting is kind of common as well, like this is kind of superfluous, you've said this many times. So you look at a lot of notes like that. As an author who is also has editors who work with me on my books, I will get my manuscript back and it will have 5,000 comments and changes on it. And like legit, that's like minimum. And I'll have to like, and I just,
prose, right?
sorry, yeah, prose, like for narrative prose.
But is any of that massive structural changes?
Some of it is like, oh yeah, you need to add a chapter here. I'll be
Oh,
like,
wow,
all right.
okay.
I'll just put out there that I do think that systematically, comics are under-edited compared to prose.
Yes.
There's much less editing, and the editors expect to do less work. At almost every company I've seen, the level of editing is lighter than you might expect from in the prose world. It's much tighter.
Yeah, I would say in comics, a lot of the things that I see in terms of issues will be, I think you need to add 1 or 2 pages. For example, in a project that I'm already working on that day, this was a major character, and in the throwaway line, it's mentioned that they're now dead. I think you need to kind of come back to that and kind of talk more about that. They were a major character, or the lettering was off, like the sound effects were just getting lost, and so things like that need a tightening up. Those kind of things do take hours, and sometimes it's like maybe you need to redraw this angle, sort of thing, but it's not like, we have this book, we've accepted it, we're going to publish it. Now make these changes, and it's going to be a huge change, and it's what I want, and it's completely undoing everything that you want, or else it won't get published.
It's a collaborative
It
experience.
doesn't, it's very collaborative. It's very much like we don't have an agenda, except we want your book to be the best that it is when it reaches the trade market.
I will say though, that as a publisher, like I have had times where our editors have come back to us and say, I did make suggestions to, the author that I thought were important, and they rejected those suggestions. I just want you to know. And then we will have a conversation, a deeper one, with the author to go like, what is your reasoning behind keeping this? Like, is it just you're holding on to your darlings, or is there something here that you maybe need to let go of because it's for the betterment of the book? And maybe we miss something, like that can happen too, where we're just like, and maybe it is exactly what Sam said, where there's a gap here, and that's why this didn't work because that wasn't there. There's, those are the types of like more, complex discussions you have.
So sorry, but that's all the time we have. Everyone's get back to their tables for the last 15 minutes. So thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, if you'd like to find out more information about Beiko and have fun there upstairs, you can ask, or you can check out the website, or you can come back tomorrow. Buy books.